over the past 18 months or so, I've probably spent a lot of time researching and learning about how to address Dropbox in the business. Just a quick raise of hands, how many people are actually using Dropbox kind of in their day-to-day business? How many people have seen it actually get used through various forms of shadow IT within their business as well? It's pretty common. There are many others in this space, but the 800-pound gorilla definitely seems to be Dropbox. Not to say that there's anything wrong with it, because they do have their own, business-ready offering as well. But I've seen that there's a fundamental shift in kind of the way we do business. No longer are we cubicle jockeys tied to one place and then maybe working at home having to painfully connect into a VPN. Me personally, I'm probably at 5 or 6 different places on any given week, whether it's my home, at the office, customer sites, or the various Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts that'll have me. So I need access to my files wherever, however, whether I'm working on my iPad or my iPhone or on my Mac. I was going to come out today with just some note cards, and I felt like I wouldn't be practicing when I'm preaching, so I'm actually using a file sync and share tool to access my talking points for today. So with that being said, I'll sit down here, and Derek, prior to joining American Family, what was your experience with file sync and share technologies? Had you ever deployed it at an organization before? Kind of what was your exposure level prior to us engaging with you at American Family Insurance?
Sounds like a staged question, so it's a very good one. Yes. And to touch on your iPad and the file sync and share that we were using today, we were actually collaborating on those talking points this morning.
Absolutely were.
Through that solution. Yes, so I've had the opportunity to be with a couple of organizations that have shown interest in a file sync and share solution and have acted upon that. So from my previous company in Scottsdale, Arizona, we selected a file sync and share, and we implemented it rather quickly. The process to select went rapidly because we observed the Dropbox problem, and we knew that data was being leaked and in solutions we weren't managing. So we got in front of that, and it was a pharmaceutical company, and we had pharmaceutical reps across the nation that were using consumer-like products.
Sure.
The adoption we saw happened rapidly. We made it available through our mobile device management, published the application, sent out a link, let them know that their credentials worked in both, and the firestorm continued from there. So they quickly adapted, put all of their documents in there, and we just saw a pretty rapid increase in usage.
Sure. What were American Family's challenges when it came to file sync and share? What type of exposure, or how rampant was the use of free utilities?
Yeah, so a little bit about American Family Insurance. We're in 19 states, and we have roughly 10,000 agent or agent staff across those 19 states. So through monitoring tools, we know that it is a problem. These documents are floating out. We can see this data move in between exchange mailboxes and emailing themselves and just moving this data. So it is a problem, and the biggest part of it is we don't know what's out there.
Sure.
And through a sync and share solution, we will be able to manage that.
Sure. That was going to touch on my next topic, what the business risk was going to be. Was there potentially sensitive information that was going to get out? And if so, what type of exposure was that leaving your organization?
Yeah, so we just don't know. And that's what is driving our decision making right now. Sure. Is we need to put in a solution that will be easily adopted. So it has to be familiar. It has to be Dropbox-like is kind of our gut check.
Sure.
And through that, we're hoping for adoption pretty quickly. And we'll put in security controls to make sure that policyholder information is not being put in there, and that just documents and presentations and marketing material is the stuff that is being used.
Sure. Yeah, you touch on a very important topic there. I think over the past number of years, we've done a great job at really securing the data center, but the endpoints themselves, we haven't done a very good, we haven't focused as much time and effort to secure all of the content and unstructured data that we create on a day-to-day basis. Were your end users actually going to the business to ask for this, or is this something that you guys had to realize was a problem and actually finally have to address yourselves?
So twofold. One is when I joined American Family, we put together a strategy to detach the data and applications from the endpoints. So I believe Chad talked about it earlier this morning about the old IT. This is the single image, this is the machine that you get. We see that there is this consumerization and that people want to use anything that they have at their home and use it for work. So we had that strategy to develop, and that aligned with the file sync and share to make sure that this data is readily available. The other component was the business was coming to us, and the luxury of me joining American Family is I was new. I was asking a lot of questions. I was new to the insurance industry. I needed to know more about the agent workflows. I needed to know about claims workflows. And that allowed me to ask the right questions and understand some of these processes that these divisional units were going through, and some of the pain that they had to deal with where technology would enable that. So it was twofold. Developed a strategy to detach the data, and then also listening to the business.
Now, what was the process that American Family went through to agree that they finally needed to address the problem versus just flat out blocking the services? I know that tends to be kind of the easiest solution to the problem is, hey, let's go on the corporate firewall and just block all of these services. Let's lock down the machines.
Yeah.
But usually if you do that, they'll find a different solution that'll kind of address their problem in potentially even a less secure way than what the drop boxes of the world probably provide.
The users will adapt. And so lengthy discussions with our security team, and we had to sit down and have some rational discussions, because that is the gut reaction. Well, let's just shut it off. Mm-hmm. That's easy. Well, now we don't know the impacts on productivity. We don't know, and there likely are, business processes using a sync and share technology that we're not entirely sure outside of the major agency and claims processes. So once we kind of sat down and discussed it, we knew we needed some help from an external source. So we reached out to you and your team.
Thank you. We absolutely appreciate it.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
Try not to be terrible.
We didn't just
shameless.
meet.
No. Hello, end customer. Yeah. So what were the primary business use cases that led to a push for enterprise file sync and share? Kind of what were some of the, what do you call low-hanging fruit that could easily be addressed?
FTP sites were managed by our networking team, and still are until we have our solution in place. I talked a little bit about the agency and claims workflows. The ones outside of that were new to me. Investments, possibly capital ventures groups reaching out to external parties. Some of the mortgage and real estate teams were working with a sync and share, or are working with the sync and share technology. And IT. So that is another big one. They're getting data from some of their vendor support, and they needed a solution to be able to share data.
Sure. Can you touch in on a little bit of the agency and claims workflows and how a file sync and share solution could address that particular set of use cases? Since that seemed to be one of the ones when we were having our discussions that seemed to make the most sense kind of right off the bat.
Marketing materials, electronic brochures, so to speak, allowing the marketing team to send out one electronic copy in real time, and those expire. That marketing material expires, so to be able to pull that back in one click, and so it's removed from all iPads, all desktops. That is a good use case for marketing. The other one is real time. It's claims. It's customer in need. I need to take a picture. I need to make sure that the customer and I can share some data. If they have pictures, I need to get a hold of those. And right now they're through email and they're through other consumer-like utilities. And this gives them a data room, so to speak, where they can put all of their customers' pictures and logs and information around that claim.
Were there any requirements on kind of keeping some of that data separate from, separately accessed from other people?
Granularity in permissions is one of the key requirements for the sync and share solution. So we needed the user to be able to administer that, and that's what the solutions that we're reviewing offer. Is it doesn't have to be done by back-end IT. This is a very consumer-like model where I can say this file or this folder can be accessed, downloaded, or printed, or not printed.
Sure. And what benefits were you going to kind of see, outside of just being able to kind of do the basic file syncing and sharing? You mentioned email, for example. I'm sure that a lot of people's mailboxes were being clogged up. I don't believe you guys have a hosted solution at this point.
No.
So what was that causing some additional challenges outside of just, hey, if we can get it out of the mail flow stream, now you're reclaiming a lot of
Yes.
empty space.
And I think it was touched on even this morning about how email is kind of our workflow engine now, and there's a better way to do business. Sure. And so what we're looking for in a file sync and share solution is a platform that can change the way the business thinks about how data flows. Mm-hmm. Right now, it may be put on an internal site, but then it's downloaded once and managed through email for the rest of its life. It isn't collaborated within that internal site any longer. As soon as it's downloaded once, it's gone. It's as good as old. You have version 1.0 out there, but 10.0 has been an email.
Not to take a shot at any Microsoft solutions out there, or any just the classic document repositories, sure. the enterprise content managers. They tend to take the old school, hey, let's check a document out, make our changes, or all of a sudden you're sending documents out and which version is the correct one and should be maintained.
Well, again, ServiceNow touched on that this morning. That's just not how we think sure. outside of work. So it just isn't relevant.
Now, I think one of the, for me personally, one of the toughest things to actually address isn't actually figuring out what solution you need to go with. It's the data governance policies that actually surround that solution. What was your process for kind of defining that? Who did you need to have involved? And what were some of the challenges that some people who may not have the exposure to a file sync and share solution, how do they get their mind around kind of the traditional way of, here's a Windows file server, here you go, here's your whack XYZ. What processes did you guys have to go through to address those challenges?
So I knew to be successful that the security team and I had to partner from the get-go. So that's exactly what I did. I saddled up next to them, understood those governance requirements, made sure that they were in the loop every step of the way, building those requirements, engaged in our sessions when your team came on site. They have been there at its inception. It wasn't a last minute, hey, can you double check this solution to make sure we're good to go? That is my advice, is to make sure security is involved early and often.
Tends to be the first thing that, if you're operating in a bubble, that most infrastructure teams tend to forget is, hey, there are other groups that we have to work with.
Yeah.
And it's almost one of the fundamental aspects of when you're doing your evaluation, is security is almost at the forefront of these discussions, because it can even make certain vendors out there just hands off because, hey, they only have a cloud-based solution, or vice versa, they don't the on-prem versions don't have a cloud offering. Mm-hmm. Now, flipping it over to the end user, what features were your customers kind of most looking forward to, apart from you mentioned having that same look and feel, or at least usability of Dropbox? What features were they looking for most, or that were requested?
So it is just that usability model. It's to be able to quickly develop folders, quickly understand how I can invite individuals or teams to a folder, to a file, being able to manage that document from a granular level. All of that, I would say, is is table stakes amongst most providers. You're going to see that they have a very familiar feel, and with that rapid development in each of those solutions, one would have a feature 1 month that seems really intuitive, and the next time we meet with the other competitor, they have it. So at the end of the day, that space is going to be there.
Yeah, this marketplace is always rapidly developing. Most vendors tend to take the agile methodology of new releases and new features and functions almost on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis. So good to know. From a security standpoint, like I mentioned before, it's one of the big challenges that usually see that most customers have is my data secure, especially if I go cloud-based. How do I ensure that nobody can access my data? And typically encryption keys happens to be one of them. Now, in your evaluation, was that kind of a showstopper, not being able to maintain a copy of your encryption keys? Or if it wasn't, how did you address that with your security team to get them comfortable with being okay, kind of surrendering that control at least temporarily?
Right, so that was a requirement, and before we moved on with any kind of engagement with a certain solution, we needed to understand where those keys lived, and if a third-party tool is necessary for us to have on site, on our on-prem, that it needed to be in place before we went forward with it.
So did American Family decide to go with a cloud-based version or an on-prem solution, given that you do potentially have to store some customer-sensitive information, some data that would require at least a data loss prevention solution? And if so, what kind of pushed you one direction or the other?
Through our exercise, when your team was on site, we got to the point where we understood that hosting files was not our core competency. We should not be in that space. So we made the decision through the consulting engagement to go with only cloud-based providers. And with the requirement that we have access to the keys, that was an accepted decision. And frankly, and this isn't a plug, I don't know if we would have got to that point, that kind of line in the sand without that engagement. What the engagement brought us was consensus. And that's kind of what you need when you're talking about this type of tool. So we brought in the business, we brought in sales representation, claims representation, several business technology areas into the discussion, along with our security and networking and storage teams to talk about this and then determine cloud-based. I think I threw it out there. Why would we have this? If we were to do it, this was our mindset, it would take us several more months potentially to deploy it. If we go completely cloud-based, we can deliver value to the business much more quickly.
Now, usually one thing another topic that I've seen talking in front of customers is data migration strategies. So you have all of these existing legacy file servers. You have, in your case, hundreds of offices nationwide that have their own individual file servers. Does it make sense to just do a bulk import? Kind of what was your strategy, or what is your thinking in terms of how to do that kind of data ingest and data migration?
Yeah, that's still in flight. We're going to watch the adoption of this. So we'll have pilot groups throughout each of our key divisional use cases. And so we'll watch, can they do it themselves? Is it an easy practice? Or do we need to engage some professional services to potentially manage that activity? Okay. So we don't know. That's a great question that we have right now. It's an open
It seems to
item.
be an ongoing one, and at least until, in your case, a cloud-based solution, until you can move all of your kind of standard file server-based content into whatever solution you do end up selecting, tends to be kind of, you have to take a pragmatic approach. Very few organizations, particularly at your scale, could actually do kind of a bulk move of all of your data all at once, particularly even just from the existing financial investment.
Right.
So file sync and share is great. A lot of us see the value in our kind of day-to-day lives. Besides that, we were talking backstage, and that it's really just kind of the basis for kind of moving forward. What other additional use cases do you see the file sync and share platform really kind of being able to address? I know that in our engagement, we had some teams from your dev team there talking about potentially leveraging it for mobile applications. What other thoughts do you guys have, kind of more as a long-term vision approach to file sync and share?
Yes, so through those discussions, sending a file, collaborating, editing at the same time with other individuals is pretty common throughout these solutions. So where we're at with our decision now is looking at each solution strategically. What API integrations do they have? Do they partner with some of our key strategic partners with signatures and mobile development? And what do those plugins look like, and what can we take advantage of through some of these solutions? So that is where we're looking at this tool now, is to be strategic in developing business processes around this platform.
Sure. Now, from the end users, the flip side, what integrations were you looking at from a usability perspective? Because sure, it definitely takes a little bit of a shift to actually being used to potentially going to a web page or having your own little magic folder, so to speak. What to enable rapid adoption or use? What other features were you looking for? Was it it needs to have Office integration, or what other features were important to your end users?
Office is a big one. Having the button up in the ribbon to save to the sync and share solution is important. It needs to be accessible through a Windows Explorer or through the Finder on a Mac. It has to have a very usable app on the Play Store or iOS. And again, it needs to be intuitive. If we're looking for the adoption, if we're really looking to this strategy to detach data, to reduce our risk from information being on the endpoints, it has to be an easy-to-use solution. And so that's what we're looking at. That's our gut check.
Sure. And now for your claims application, I believe one of the challenges that you have is a lot of cameras today are very, very high resolution. Are you thinking of potentially leveraging whatever solution to being able to address some of that problem, where they could at least call for some of that data before it gets kind of bulk processed?
Yeah, and again, we want to be able to pick the right solution, so they will develop to that. There aren't any set plans right now for that type of business process, but I think if we provide them the platform, they will come, so to speak.
Yeah, I think one of the topics that we ended up touching on as well was, does it make sense to just give this to everybody and let everybody kind of have it? How did you address potentially just saying, everybody, here you go, let's go kind of hog wild?
Yeah.
What made you rethink that potentially, where you just giving everybody access to file sync and share solution?
Yeah. So you remember me saying that? Yeah. So we were kind of late in the day, and everyone's coffee had ran out, and I said, well, let's just give it to everybody.
Sure.
Why do we care? If it's going to be that easy to use, if the migration of their data can just be dragged and dropped, if we open it up, give them the website, give them the app through the mobile device management, let them use it. It's out there anyway. The data is floating around. We're at a risk now. What's the problem? And no one has even talked me off that ledge yet. So I'm thinking maybe you might backstage, but it's an option.
It absolutely is. I mean, especially for your organization, where it is already very much rapidly adopted.
Yeah.
If you give somebody an equally good, if not better, alternative to what they have today, at least then you can feel comfortable in saying, hey, at a certain date and time, all of these other solutions
are off.
Turned off.
Yes.
Is that actually going to be part of your strategy? So kind of how long into the actual adoption would you look to actually sunset some of those other services?
Pretty rapidly, we would. So, even Apple's announcement earlier in the week,
sure,
with the iCloud Drive,
yeah.
It is now more and more available to store documents out in the cloud. So, again, if we don't have something better, they will use that as well.
Sure.
And so that is kind of the method behind my madness of give it to everybody and and just kind of watch them come and watch them adapt, and maybe we tinker and pull the levers a little bit, but there are people that stop by often and ask where this project is.
Sure. I think the last topic here that you and I touched on is, from a security standpoint, what were some of the most important features that your business needed to have, particularly in talking about some of the board of directors use cases where, it really needed to be as locked down as
Yes.
humanly possible?
Yes.
What levels of auditing did you need in the solution as
Yes.
well?
So that's the granularity I'm talking about. These data rooms where documents aren't available until X amount of days before, Y event, and then they'll be expired at this time after that event. So we needed to create these types of environments.
Sure.
Versus email or USB or whatever other methods being
Absolutely.
used.
And then at least IT has control and visibility
Yes.
of the data. I don't have any other questions for you. If you have any last words of advice for the audience, I'll certainly turn it over to you.
And I think the first one was engage with security. The other one is really ask your business what they're looking for, and have it be okay for them to tell you that they're using Dropbox or something similar. That's okay. Then you know that you have a gap to fill. So ask a lot of questions. I would listen to them before you start down the road of finding that specific solution
Sure.
for them, because they're the ones that are going to be developing processes around this utility.
And if it's free, hey, even better. If they're comfortable with the data being in kind of the free version of Dropbox,
Yes.
It's going to be tough to sell them a solution that
Right.
costs them money.
Right.
So, Derek, I do appreciate
Sure.
your time today.
Of course.
Thank you, everybody.